We're talking about the Luke Skywalker ending of The Mandalorian versus the Darth Vader ending of Rogue One. And
Yeah, which lightsaber ending was better?
well, I thought I was actually going to have an answer for this, but I mean, you have to look at it a couple of different ways. I would say probably for just impact and action, I would have to say the Luke Skywalker ending, because he just goes in and the Dark Troopers are way more powerful than the Rebels were. And, he's just cleaning house. I mean, they're very similar, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that was
the two
thing.
endings.
That's what everybody said after they saw it. It's like, man, this reminds me of the end of Rogue One.
It really does. But I'm going to go with the Darth Vader scene, and here's why. The reason I'm going with the Darth Vader scene is because of the emotional impact that it has in the fact that this is the time that we see Vader actually kicking butt as Vader in the suit.
Yeah, mechanical Vader.
And you really need to see the mechanical Vader somehow on screen doing its thing. It also does happen to be, before you guys start correcting me in the comments or on the chat, I do understand that this is also the first time that we see Luke at more of a master/grandmaster level too.
Mm-hmm.
However, we had already known that Luke was basically going to go into this, and we also see that through the sequel trilogy that he's ultra powerful. With Vader, we had never really seen Vader being just as, I guess, like super powerful as he is at the end of Rogue One. And it really just shows you, it makes Vader more threatening because, and you brought this up at the time that the Rogue One movie came out, and we were talking about this ending on one of the previous shows, and you're like, before now, we never, even though we understood kind of, it's like, why is everybody so scared to death of this guy?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about him that makes everybody so freaked out by him? Well, now you see.
Yeah.
Because this is something that the Empire has seen all along. Like, hey, listen, this guy can really do a lot of damage. So I'm going to have to go with the Darth Vader one. Come on, man. I know you're going with the Darth Vader one.
Of course I am, man.
I mean, I know you are. I almost picked the Luke Skywalker because...
Just to make it a battle.
Just to make it a battle. But I mean, I can still do it, though.
Yeah, you could.
I can make the argument. But it's really difficult because really the two parallel each other so much. In fact, I would not be shocked
if they really based it off of that.
Yeah, if they based it off of it.
Well,
I mean, look at her picture down here.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Kind of like, about the only thing that you can say to is that Vader, but again, he wasn't fighting Dark Troopers either. But, Vader was just like one hand, just casually swinging his lightsaber. Like it was nothing for him. On the other hand, even though Luke was, making these wide sweeping movements, that was Luke's fighting style, number one, at that time. And number two, Luke still was going through those Dark Troopers with ease. I mean, when you look at the one Dark Trooper that Mando had to fight, it was like, you saw how powerful they were. And
Yeah.
Luke is just going through, and he was almost cutting them up like the way the prequel era guys did the battle droids.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually totally what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, wow.
The big battle droids, yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird to see that because it was another thing, because I had so many things going through my head when I first saw that scene, as we'll get to, of course, in our cantina thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I was really going through my head was when I saw that it was almost like Luke now acting kind of like a prequel era Jedi. Because we had never seen Luke have to fight any kind of droid before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that I remember anyway.
No.
So it was one of those things that you basically have a situation where Vader, on the other hand, though, he really had to, really had to establish himself as more of the guy that was fearsome.
Well, let's get to the chats before I go into my dissertation.
Okay.
Dwight is back with us. What's up, man?
Hey,
he
Dwight.
says Vader. All others just gets compared to the Vader scene. He says spot on, Eric.
I see. I knew I liked this guy.
Who doesn't like Dwight?
Dwight's cool. We like Dwight.
Ronaldo says the Luke scene was very emotional for me. It was epic, and I always wanted to see Luke destroy some guys.
It's emotional for you? I'm gonna make fun of you. Oh wait, I can't do that till later.
Ronaldo also says, but Vader has that aura of horror that, thanks to the Rogue One soldiers, and I think it illustrates why Vader is feared in the galaxy. So I go for Vader's. Prototype Boba Fett. Someone new. All right. There was a hallway scene in Clone Wars season 7 involving Darth Maul. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
that's right.
When he picked up that shield and he was just like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
I
and Ronaldo just
totally forgot that.
Yeah, he says, what about Maul in the last season of Clone Wars? Yep.
Man, you guys are just like
So
you always have our backs though. That's what we like about you guys.
So here's the thing though. So
yeah, it gives us a lot to talk about. That's why I like the chat so much.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So when I looked at this, I was like, okay, like you said, I originally had something else. And then it just kind of hit me. I was never really satisfied with that though. And then something else kind of hit. And then this whole Mandalorian thing came up again. And I was just like, everybody kept comparing it to the Vader scene. I was like, well, that's it. So let me just really break this down.
So let me ask you this before you get into all this. When you first saw the Luke scene, did you think of the Vader scene right away, or was that something that occurred later?
Later, for me.
Okay.
For me, it was later. I mean, I think I was just in the shock.
Not for me.
I was just in the shock moment. I really in the shock moment, like most people.
Well, that's true. I remember we were talking about it. It was kind of like, wait, is that? Because I mean, at first we're thinking, well, maybe it's Wedge. Maybe
Well, see, that's the thing though, and I think so. When we look at it, and that's part of the reasons why I asked people about this question, because see, with Vader, you kind of already knew he was there. Like in Rogue One, we've already saw him choke Krennic earlier. We've seen him pop up, so we knew Vader was around. But like in the Mandalorian, this is the time period where Luke Skywalker, we know he's present, but we've never seen him. And no one ever really thought that we would actually get a Luke Skywalker scene.
You know what this is like? This is exactly like the Maul cameo at the end of Solo.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah, in the sense
that you're talking about.
Right. So I think for a lot of people were going with the Luke scene because, one, you didn't expect it. Two, it's like Ronaldo said, you always kind of wanted to see Luke just waste on some people. Just be that more all-powerful like Jedi that we all knew him to be, but we never got a chance to see that. So I can understand why a lot of people would go with the Luke scene, and the type, and because we actually got a chance to see him do something that we've never seen done before. That's the whole Force Crush thing. When he takes that one droid at the very end, he just like crushes him like a pop can.
And it was so satisfying to me.
It was, and especially when he used the black glove side too. That was made it even more like.
Well, and what was especially cool about that for Moff Gideon to see was the fact that he's touting these things as like, these are these ultra powerful, unstoppable.
Yeah, you're gonna die. Like you guys can put up a fight, but right, we know how this is gonna end.
And yet Luke just like kind of holds up his hand, and the thing just crushes underneath his force grip, and it's like, yeah, there's your unstoppable. Just like Titanic was an unsinkable ship, right? Yep. But then again, I go back and forth on that because it's like, well, that's also the reason why Gideon looked terrified, which we had never seen before
from him. And so, but see, it juxtaposed to that with the Vader scene, when Vader pops up and, he ignites that red blade and everybody's just like, uh-oh.
Dude, the funniest thing to me was that one dude, it's him.
Yeah. So it
gets me every time. Yeah. It's like, oh man, yes, everybody knows who Vader is. Like, it's him.
Well, yeah, and then the fact that it's just like, all right, everybody's like open fire, and the fact that he was met with such a barrage, and the fact that Vader just did it with one hand.
Yeah,
like he's just one hand. He's just going.
Because I rewatched that. I totally rewatched that scene not that long ago. It wasn't even part of the movie. It was like, for some reason, I rewatched the scene. That's why it's so timely that you put this in here, because I was rewatching it, and that was the one thing that I noticed, was that, I mean, Vader was just being fired upon by just a ton of laser fire.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's just one hand deflecting all of it effortlessly.
Yeah, not a bit concerned at all.
Not concerned at all. Not even really slowing his pace, really.
So what made, and then you look at Luke, you know, I mean, he was doing some cool stuff, but he was very, you know, very much in control. The only thing about his thing, I think Luke's scene was longer than Vader's.
Yeah.
So that made it, you know, even more cool.
Well, he also, because if you think about it too, he had to go through more.
Yeah.
You know, more of the ship basically than, I mean, Vader
Yeah.
just had to go down a hallway pretty much, you know,
Yeah,
and
he
that was it.
that- yeah, he was just in that little hallway for the cargo bay, and he was like, all right. But I think one of the things that, you know, a lot of fans were saying about the whole Luke battle versus Vader was that, you know, with Luke, he had people kind of, because it was that one scene when they were actually watching it on the screen, where he was actually kind of like surrounded by them. And the fact that he was actually able to just like, once again, like,
I mean, they were more powerful than the rebel. I mean, to fight off those dark troopers. Actually, yeah, they were like, that's right. I almost forgot about that scene, but that's right. He was surrounded.
Yeah,
and think of how powerful they were. That's the thing that I think a lot of times people miss when they're analyzing this is just how formidable each of these things by themselves would be. Now imagine being surrounded by them. And what was nice was he was using a combination of force powers and lightsaber.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I will say, I did like my heart did do the little pitter patter when he popped off the elevator, and you kind of saw him like run a little bit. He just kind of was sidestepping people, and I was just like, oh, like Luke is really, because before he's just kind of casually walking and kind of doing this stuff, but now he's really kind of like into it. And the fact that he's using like the heads of one just to sling it at the other one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just like...
Well, the other thing that was really satisfying to me about that part too was the fact that, and I brought this up when we did our review, is that it wasn't one of those typical cliche things where the elevator doors open and they don't see him and then he pops out. Like, no, man, he wasn't scared of him at all.
Nah.
You know, elevator door pops open. He's standing there. Like, yeah, I don't even have to bother hiding from these things because they're just not powerful enough to stop me.
Exactly.
You know, it was very...
Well, but I think for me overall, I'm still going to go with Vader.
So am I.
And here's the reason why. It's the type of horror that, you know, it gives you a different kind of chill. And the fact that he's so merciless. See, the thing is, the difference is because you're dealing with droids, so you don't have that emotional connection.
That's true.
Vader's actually killing people. Like, he's walking down a hallway, and he's literally like, okay, he brings the guy up to the ceiling with the Force. Not only is he like choking him, but then he actually swipes his chest as he's walking, still deflecting the lasers. Then he does something that I thought was just brilliant, where he actually uses the Force and just takes all their guns away. So now they don't even have anything to shoot at him. So now they're just
honestly,
like sitting
that was
ducks.
one of the coolest.
That was the coolest thing in the world.
That was one of the coolest things, and that's one of the examples of this is how I wish that they would use the Force.
Exactly.
This is a practical thing that anybody would do.
Yeah.
Instead of, I wish that they wouldn't always go for that whole Hollywood movie thing. Like, okay, we got to make it look good, or we got to make it look pretty, or whatever it is. You know, we got to give them the big blockbuster thing, right?
Right.
Do something that actually makes sense within the story. Now, granted, that looked cool. So, I mean, I guess it checks that box off. But at the same time, this is the way that somebody would actually use the Force if they had it.
This is the way. No. But the cool thing I did love about both scenes, which both directors did very, very well, was they captured the essence of the characters. So when you're watching Luke, who's a good guy, he's a Jedi, they're always talking about calm, peace, and that's exactly how he's moving. Very calmly. mean, he's destroying stuff, but it's just like, it's
very graceful.
It's very graceful. Yeah, very graceful. When you're looking at Vader, he's coming through with full power. Like, I'm not playing no games with you. Give me all your weapons. I'm stabbing you. And then he's like hacking at him.
Yeah, he's an unstoppable force. That's basically what it is. You can't, he's going to keep, he's like a juggernaut. He's going to keep moving forward.
Exactly.
And it's true. There's some minor differences, even though it was the same kind of thing. You had two powerful force users moving through a passage of some sort and vanquishing the enemies that they were there to destroy. But as you pointed out, they did it in such a way that it actually honors the character.
Yeah.
Where it's not out of character. It almost emphasized their characters.
Exactly.
And that's true. And the other thing that I love that you brought up is the fact that with Vader, and this, I wasn't even really thinking of that. I was thinking more of the emotional impact and how you had to, really explain Vader, demonstrate his power, that kind of thing. But you're right. The horror aspect of it. And again, this goes into Vader's character. They did it very much like a horror movie.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, oh man, it was almost like a Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers kind of thing coming down.
It's that whole moment where you hear the creak of the docking ship.
Yeah.
You hear that creaking, and then you see like the little shuttle approaching, so you just don't know what's really about to happen. Then you hear the little creaking, and then there's like nothing but darkness down the hallway. They're all like lined up down this hallway. They're probably expecting troopers. And then you just see this red blade just come out, and this kind of has that glow in that hallway, and you just have his silhouette. And Vader stands there almost like 7 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Shaquille O'Neal coming down a hallway, and he's about as big as Shaq too. Like, Vader's not like a skinny guy; like, his suit is huge. So he's moving down this hallway with this one single blade, and he's just blocking everything. But he's coming through with all this power, and not only is he, he's actually picking people up on the wall, hacking them, and then he grabs that one poor guy. He crushes him and he slings him against the wall. He's crushing him right there. Then he impales this guy through the blast door.
Oh,
I mean, he was just like,
he was just crazy. It was nuts.
Crazy.
Let's get to some of these chats. Ronaldo, back on Maul's point. Maul's is very good and a bit violent if you look at it correctly, but I'll put it in third place just because he doesn't have a lightsaber. He goes on to say, I think if Luke had killed stormtroopers instead of dark troopers, he would have felt a little strange and less heroic. I could probably hang with that.
I don't know about that.
But then again, I don't know. I mean, stormtroopers still, it's kind of like,
you don't have a face with them. They're a faceless.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing.
In fact, I remember for a long time I thought they were droids.
Yeah, I thought they were like some like robots.
I mean, when I first saw Star Wars back in like '77, I thought, oh, they're, it was only after a while that I sort of caught on. Well, of course, even that conversation. Oh, did you see the new T-16 coming out or whatever?
Dwight, one of the best parts, he was basically like, okay, that last shot I missed and it hurt. Give me these blasters. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think is that when you look at it, not only is it really fitting in their character by the overall look and just the feel, but even the way that they use their powers, even how they pretty much maneuvered through. I think it was a really subtle way of basically emphasizing the characteristics of each of these characters, which I think is one of the things that was really nice. It was subtle, but if you actually are looking for it, you can pick up on it.
And the other thing that I was watching some other comparisons on this, and they were actually right that he used a lot of Anakin from Revenge of the Sith fighting style. Like, as far as like he did the whole lightsaber behind his back blocking.
Yeah, that's like a lot of little different things. Yep. That is a very good point. The fact that there was quite a bit of Anakin in that scene.
Yeah,
and that was a really nice transition. Now, of course, one of the criticisms is like, okay, wait a second. You have him fighting like this, And then a few scenes later, you know.
Oh, when he fights Obi-Wan?
Yeah, but I mean,
Oh, yeah.
being the fact that it's like, guys, at some point, you just have to look at the fact that one was made in 77.
Right.
The other one was made in like 2016?
16, 17.
Yeah, 16. So, I mean, you just have to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than, like I said, I've been plowing through Star Trek Discovery. It's kind of the same thing. It takes place a decade before the original series. Now, I finished season 2. They did try to a little bit explain it, but it's, you know what? What are you going to do? Are you going to try to make a series that looks like the 1960s version?
Well, the other thing, at least for, to that argument, they did have an in-canon sort of response to that. And that's, because Vader knows it's Obi-Wan. The last time they actually dueled, he kind of took for granted that he could just beat Obi-Wan. He realized he could not. So now Obi-Wan, in theory, you got to think about it, he's older and wiser and probably more seasoned as far as a swordsman. So he's probably trying to take his time with him because he doesn't want, there are no second chances. I mean, he's already got on his second legs, if you will. So Vader is probably going at Obi-Wan very cautiously because he's like, okay, I know what you can do. The whole reason why I'm in this suit is because of you. You really think about it. So Vader's probably going at Obi-Wan in the New Hope very carefully.
Well, the other thing that I think too, it goes along with that, is that they were really, it wasn't so much that they were dueling, they were really having more of a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The duel was kind of secondary in a way. And the other thing too is that with that whole older and wiser, that was one of the in-canon explanations for why the prequel Jedi fought differently from, I mean, besides the fact that the Jedi hadn't been around for a while.
Right.
The more powerful, I guess for lack of a better term, that you get in the Force, you don't have to do all that stuff.
Right.
You learn more of economy of motion,
mm-hmm.
things of that nature. I don't have to do all this crazy stuff to accomplish what I need to accomplish.
Right, and you even saw that in the prequels with Dooku. Dooku didn't do a whole lot of those flips.
Right, and because he was ultra powerful, and add to that the fact that you could also make the argument that in the Force, now because you're in a higher level, right, you're basically even deeper into the Force, you can sense things a lot more.
Yeah, that was one of the things that they brought up about Luke, is the fact that he actually learned how to slow things down, like almost using the Force to kind of move things in slow mo. So he could react to a lot of stuff a whole lot fast. It seemed like he was moving really fast, but it was more so the fact that he slowed everything else, kind of the world around him, down. So he could move the way he needed to move.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when you're doing that, and that's why you don't have to do this. See, I think that in the prequel era, especially the Jedi that were knights, maybe not so much masters, but knights, they are relying more on the lightsaber fighting style than they are on the Force. Whereas I think that when you become more of a master, grandmaster, now you're relying more on the Force than the actual lightsaber skill.
True.
Because even Palpatine, I mean, if you look at, and actually that was one of the reasons why I love the whole Mace Palpatine duel. Because even though Palpatine was more powerful, technically, it's not by a super amount. I mean, fighting Mace was kind of like fighting Yoda in a sense. So you saw that their dueling was a little bit different than, say, like an Obi-Wan Anakin kind of thing.
Right. Dwight asked a really good question. Who do you think will win, Prime Vader or Prime Luke?
Well, that actually depends. Dwight, are you talking about Prime Vader as in Vader before he gets in the suit? Or Prime Vader as in Vader after the suit? If it's Prime Vader before the suit, then Vader all the way. Because we know, straight from Lucas's mouth, and I know Jason is probably going to comment on this. He comments on, writes paragraphs, actually. Very interesting, detailed analysis of everything that we talk about. And then he brings his own stuff in. That's why I can't wait till he's able to actually join us live again. But he's probably going to say stuff about this. But essentially, Lucas, straight from his mouth on one of the commentaries, said that had Anakin never been in the suit, he would have been more powerful than anybody. Now, of course, he switched to the dark side, which gives him an initial power boost. So I'm going to go with if Vader had kept rising in the dark side but never was in the suit, because the suit basically was somewhat cumbersome and pretty much limited him.
Mm-hmm.
He actually had to relearn his whole fighting style, actually.
Right.
Which is one of the in-canon explanations they give, too, is that, well, you know, he had to learn how to fight differently. That's why Vader fights differently from Anakin. But if you're talking about, like, pre-suit, but post, I'm Darth Vader now, then him. But we all know that Luke ends up fulfilling that promise that Anakin failed by being now the Grandmaster. So I guess probably have to give it to Luke. But it's kind of tough because, you know, you start reading those Vader comics and stuff like that, man. I mean, it's...
I'm still going to go with Vader.
You think so?
Yep.
So you're going to argue with Lucas. Okay, that's fine.
Well, I mean, only because, I mean, granted, I think that Vader, honestly, I just think it's basically experience.
Well, but Dwight was talking about prime Luke. When he means prime, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dwight, but he means like at his prime, like kind of at his zenith.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. But like, you got to look at the standpoint of who did Luke really go against if we're talking about like a duel, though.
Well, now that a lot of that depends, because here's where it gets sticky, everybody. Because you have to go, are we talking about Prime Expanded Universe, Luke?
Oh my God.
Or are we talking... No, I mean, this is a legitimate point. And the reason why it's a legitimate point is because The Mandalorian actually represents the first time we've seen Prime Luke. I don't necessarily count the sequel trilogy Luke as Prime because he was out of the Force for a couple of movies. And then he jumps in...
So Dwight says after the suit,
after the suit. Yeah, then I have to definitely give it to Luke on that one. We're talking Prime, and that's in either universe. Now, I know what you're saying, because we just have The Mandalorian is the only example of new canon Prime Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if that's really Prime yet, because he's not quite... You know, I would consider... He just
probably got to the rank of Master.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider Prime Luke probably around 15 years after Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably where he... Kind of like in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, look at how powerful he is. I mean, guys, remember that Luke actually projected himself across the universe and pretty much kind of vanquished, to a degree, the First Order. I mean... This guy is extremely powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And in the expanded universe, it's even worse. He's throwing planets out of orbit. He's bringing down Star Destroyers. He's doing all this stuff. I mean, because he's become so powerful in the Force that it's almost like... Remember,
he's a god,
he is the only one who has ever really, truly achieved... I mean, they call Yoda the Grandmaster, but really Luke is the true Grandmaster of the Force. Vader, Anakin never got to that level. Now, if you go on the flip side of that, though, Vader is the only one, canonically, who has actually conjured up red Force lightning, which is even more powerful than Palpatine's Force lightning. I know Jason's going to come in on this. But that's basically... And that's it. But before we get to too much of this, I want to get to this thing that Dwight said too. One of the best parts, he was basically like, okay, that last shot I missed. Oh, we did that one already.
Yeah.
Where's the other one? Well, I guess that wasn't the other one. Oh, here's one from Ronaldo. Prime Vader without the suit. He's probably the most powerful Jedi ever. Yeah, that's where I'm going with this. It's kind of like if you take him out of the suit, but he's Vader. Well, then you almost have to go, is it Prime? It's like if Anakin had reached his potential. This we know for a fact. He would have been more powerful than Luke. The Force DNA would have been more pure, for one thing.
Right.
For another thing, it's kind of like now you're starting to get into all kinds of craziness because you have old canon versus new canon. And then you have Anakin is going to the dark side as Vader, but then he's in a suit. And then, you know what I mean? It's like there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
So the reason why we, for those who may not know, the reason why we keep bringing up the suit aspect is because, so if he's in the suit, he doesn't have a whole lot of tissue, a whole lot of his original, limbs and things of that nature. The Force flows through all living things, so the less living tissue you have, the less you have the ability to kind of, I guess, conjure it up.
That's part of what actually makes Vader's power so crazy. And actually, Lucas brought that up in the commentary, too, is that look at how powerful he is without as much living tissue.
Exactly.
Now imagine how much he would have been...
Yeah, if he had all his limbs and...
Exactly. But then, of course, the other part of it, too, is that the suit itself encumbers.
Mm-hmm.
Or...
limits him.
Yeah, it limits him as far as what he can do and his movements. And, there was... Actually, in the old canon, there was a great book called The Rise of Darth Vader, which showed him getting used to it. And the first time he went to carry out another Order 66 kill on a Jedi, he almost got his butt handed to him by a Padawan. Mm-hmm. It was hilarious. But I love that because it showed that, hey, he had to learn how to fight and do everything in this suit. And then, of course, he goes back and he just, cleans house and becomes the Vader we know. But the new canon, Lords of the Sith, deals a lot with that as well. So, we get that. See, Ronaldo says, Luke literally crushed Kylo's pride. That's funny. And then Dwight's, I guess I didn't think of Anakin being Vader before the suit at all. But technically, Obi-Wan never battled Anakin, but Vader.
True.
That is true. That is actually a very good point. Mm-hmm. He really didn't battle Anakin.
Right.
But then again, that was actually acknowledged anyway, because Yoda gave that whole thing before he went off to kill him. Like, hey,
Consume, your Padawan or your apprentice, he no longer is consumed by Darth Vader.
Yeah. It was kind of like adding that truth to the whole lie. Well, Darth Vader killed your father or whatever. It's like, well, what I told you was true from a certain point of view. Well, that was Yoda basically giving him the idea. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I know you're having problems killing this guy that was basically your brother, but if you look at it a certain way,
right,
he's not really your brother anymore. He's this Darth Vader guy now. Right. So now you're good. Go kill him.
Right.
And that was all Obi-Wan needed. Like, well, all right. Now, granted, he was still trying to turn him, but... Mm-hmm. And then Dwight says, that's true. As far as canon goes, there is no Prime Luke. Exactly. Not yet. We're getting our first glimpses of it at the end of The Mandalorian, but we don't really know yet. That's why I'm having a hard time answering this question, because you got old canon versus new canon. You got, okay, where is Luke exactly fitting in? Are we dealing with Anakin in the suit or not in the suit? I mean, there's so many variables that you have to consider that I think that before we can really definitively answer this question again, because this question was kind of answered in the old canon, well, which really wasn't canon. Lucas never really considered the expanded universe canon. Right. He did canonize certain things. That's part of what made it such a pain and why Disney decided, you know what, let's just start from scratch and make it all canon.
Right.
So that part's cool. But I don't know. We'll have to see. But again, everybody knows where everybody's standing here in the chats, and of course you guys know where we're standing, but what do you guys, if you're watching the rebroadcast of this thing, what are you guys thinking as far as the best lightsaber ending? Is it the Luke Skywalker ending from The Mandalorian Season 2? Or is it the Darth Vader one from Rogue One? Let us know in the comments section.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.